All right, so intervention stage is very action oriented because it's where we're giving our clients the tools to facilitate those changes in their life that will empower them. And so there's two different types of interventions that you can look at when you're a social worker that you look towards implementing. There's direct and indirect. So we're going to go through what those both mean and give examples of them. So I'm going to start with indirect intervention because this tends to be more focused on the macro side of social work. It's not as specific with individuals. Individuals obviously can benefit from indirect interventions because it's often impacting the systems that influence their behavior, but you're not necessarily implementing this intervention directly to them. So when a social worker interacts with target systems that affect clients during the intervention stage, it's considered direct interventions. So it might be advocating for a policy change so their clients are able to receive services. If they kind of educate a bigger system. So it's just doing something that's not necessarily going directly to the client. And so it's promoting change just like any other intervention, but it's intervening with the systems that impact the client. So this could be like if they're applying for Social Security, kind of helping advocate for them around receiving services or advocating for better application processes, those types of things that would benefit the client, but you're not directly doing to them. So it uses the social worker's political skills, and so this it ties into policy. Policy is a very indirect intervention. It really shines the light on the important role social workers can take in changing kind of policies and some of those bigger macro type influences. And so an important part is when you're doing indirect intervention is making sure that your client is okay with it and that they're aware of what you're doing, and you want to keep them involved in all processes. So again, even though it might not be directly implemented onto them, they might need to know the advocacy skill further down the road because you are not a permanent fixture in their life. And so teaching and what's the word I'm thinking of? Teaching and showing the individuals modeling. That's the word I'm thinking of. Modeling how to advocate for oneself is a very important thing for a client to see, and that can kind of be a really helpful direct intervention while you're doing an indirect. So some examples is any type of administration. So some individuals might, if you become a social worker, you might not be doing necessarily direct practice. You might be more in an administrative role, but that really does help empower clients because you're advocating for good and effective services. Supervising, so if you are one who is supervising therapists or case managers, you might not actually be providing the service directly to the client, but you're helping ensure that they're receiving good services. There's the advocacy, testifying in court, influencing policy, organizing, bargaining, publicizing, social change or development. So it does have more of a macro vibe to it. But they're all functions within social work, which are really important to know because they do then directly have some sort of effect on the client. We are not going to focus how to implement these indirect interventions just because the focus of this class is individuals and families. You'll be able to learn more about these indirect interventions during communities class as well as policy. So direct interventions, I'm going to pull this down so I can fill it all in, is when the social worker, in agreement with the client because you want their buy-in, intervenes directly with the client that shows they're engaging in direct intervention. And the goal of direct intervention is to promote client empowerment, which we talked about in the previous video, the huge emphasis empowerment has during the intervention phase. And the objectives of all of this is to provide support to a system while it carries out its contracted tasks. So that system might be your client. So if they are set a goal or an objective to get a job and they need to contact 3 different possible jobs, you might help support them in finding those jobs. So giving them job leads, helping them navigate LinkedIn or different job search sites. So you're providing the support to help them reach their goal. Assisting the client to bring about the plan change. So again, you're not doing it for them, you're partnering and coming alongside and assisting them in however they've identified to get to their planned change. Finding opportunities for the client system to gain mutual collective aid. And so that is really that you're facilitating avenues for a client to get resources, essentially. So if it is, like, again, looking for a job, you might help set up a job fair for clients to meet a bunch of potential employers, or a resource fair for someone who might be looking for housing resources. So you're just trying to create opportunities for the clients to empower themselves. Educating is a huge piece within interventions, whether it's educating them about a resource, teaching them skills, how to cope with stress, anxiety, or maybe you get more, like you end up going to get your master's and you have more skilled therapy skills. Maybe teaching them cognitive behavioral therapy or DBT intervention. So you're giving them the tools to help work towards change. Again, not doing it for them, but coming alongside them and empowering them, giving them every opportunity to succeed, not exceed. I guess I could exceed too. All right, so examples of direct intervention. So it could be any type of therapy. Therapy in itself is an intervention that you do other interventions within. Play is a great intervention. You do it a lot with children. Researching action steps. So if a client has a lot of anxiety around riding the bus, a way to help lower some of that anxiety is to maybe research a bus route that feels the safest, research how much it costs, watching YouTube videos of how you pay and how you stop, and let the bus driver know when you want to get off the bus. So rehearsing the planned action change before you're doing it to kind of minimize some of the anxiety around it. Prayer can be a direct intervention. Again, that's one that's used with a lot of caution and tactfulness. It has to be in the right setting with the right client, and the method and the intentions behind it have to be ethical. Sharing information, so giving them information about a possible job fair. Challenging stuck patterns, so that might, it's like a therapy technique. And so if a client is continually just identifying they can't do this, we kind of learn how to maybe challenge some of those beliefs as a way to motivate towards change. Encouraging your clients to maybe take a risk, doing some confronting. There'll be a handout in your the individuals and families folder about confronting that can be used as an intervention to kind of challenge behavior and help clients see kind of maybe how they're thinking or what they're doing might be harmful or maladaptive. And so using confrontation as a skill to motivate change is another type of direct intervention. Brainstorming, we learned how to do that during the goal creation stage. Also can be used at different times during the intervention phase. Relaxation exercises, so a lot of times that gets partnered with mindfulness. That's a huge intervention, and we'll be practicing some of that. Assisting the client in negotiating or mediating, making a referral, educating, cognitive restructuring, that kind of goes with cognitive behavioral therapy. Giving homework is a huge one because they actually have to do something, and helping clients identify feelings. So really, if you're thinking about what a direct intervention is, it's something that the social worker and the client engage in directly with each other. So let's talk about how to use homework. So you've already informed the client during the engagement stage that they are going to have the expectation that homework will probably occur at some point in their services. So this is a wonderful intervention to implement. Sometimes homework has negative connotations. You all are college students, so when you hear the word homework, it doesn't necessarily ignite joy and sparking good feelings. So we have to be mindful of how we are phrasing and presenting homework to our clients, because it could be taken as a negative or something cumbersome versus something that actually is helpful. So you can change how you refer to it. It can be called empowering assignment, between session tasks, prescriptions, directives, whatever works with your client and where they are at. To make homework be purposeful, it has to involve some sort of additional work on a particular skill or skills that are outside of the session. So you typically are only seeing your client for 55 minutes once a week, and so homework gives the opportunity for the clients to take the skills that are learned during the hour and then translate them into their everyday life and practice whatever you've discussed during your time in order to learn a new skill or change behavior or change a thought pattern. It just gives them a chance and some accountability to have to practice the skills that are taught. Homework can also provide really good continuity from session to session because you're going to want to check in with your client's homework at the next session. So it's a good tie-in to reflect like, hey, last week, what was your homework assignment? See if they have a recall of what we talked about. How did that go? And so you're able to kind of tie in and reflect back on the session that just occurred and then figure out in the next session, is it something that still needs to be addressed? Do we have to modify the goals? Or is it still something that we're still kind of stuck on? Or maybe we need a different approach to it. And so really homework's goal is to help clients practice the skills that are learned in the session and generalize them to the relevant areas in their life. So it's a really, really, really great intervention. It just has to be implemented well and sold to the client in a way that they get some buy-in. So here are some examples of homework. It could be journaling. Some therapy will be maybe go through a workbook with a therapist. That's a very concrete intervention. Could be behavioral, so they're practicing a new skill. So maybe it's saying no to somebody, risk-taking, doing something that's feared. So maybe it's actually riding the bus, or maybe it's calling your parent instead of texting them. Thinking, this is more of a subjective one. It's a little bit hard to sometimes measure and know if it occurred. You just have to be able to tell, like, be very specific about what you want the client to think about and how do you know and can hold them accountable to doing it. Bibliotherapeutic, so that could be something related to reading a book on a topic or reviewing an article that you've had. So it's kind of the educational piece, but giving them a resource that they have to read. And then not doing anything at all actually can be homework. So taking a break from one's usual habits. So if someone is just overloaded with stress, it might be a really good intervention to have them take 15 minutes a day to not do anything. That can be effective homework. So really, in order to make the homework effective, it does need to be specifically tied to some measurable behavior. You don't want to give homework for the sake of giving homework. Don't give them a book to read just for funsies. Have it be something related to what they are working on. You have to be mindful, too, that if you believe like a client's presenting problem is something else, but they've identified they're not ready to work on it, giving them homework about your objectives isn't going to be very impactful. So if I go back to the client who, was trying to track down Elvis and wanted him to give him his royalties, me assigning him the homework to research on the internet the date of death of Elvis isn't probably going to be very impactful because that's not his objective. If it's my objective to prove that Elvis is actually dead, that assignment might work, but it's not going to have any sort of benefit to the client. So it has to be tied to some measurable behavior that they've identified is important to work on. So that's got to be relevant to the client situation. And you really have to make sure that you're finding ways to keep your client accountable without shaming them, because they really need to complete the assignment if they are to benefit from it. Again, it's practicing the skills and generalizing them to their environment that they stay in is the way that they're going to have them stick and have their neural pathways become adjusted to these new behaviors is from practice and repetition. It also helps them become comfortable practicing them as well. So that is homework. That's one of those things that you are going to want to utilize in your video too. So being comfortable of how to create homework is going to be very, very useful, but also kind of knowing like exactly what's a good idea for homework and what you have to like remember about homework, which is having it being purposeful, is going to be very helpful in your practice as well.